Okay, so today we are going to go into a still life with multiple objects, and that's a little different than what we've been doing. Like we did on Tuesday with the limited palette landscape, we're going to employ a limited palette here in the still life. So to recap there, we're using white, yellow ochre, burnt sienna, and I'm using ultramarine blue because I specifically chose some blue objects for my still life. It's always best when you're arranging a still life like this to use an odd number of objects, 3 or 5 or 7 or what have you. Just because if you use an even number of objects, they seem to kind of pair up and fragment the setup. So choose anything you like in terms of what you're going to paint. It could be, bottles. It could be just anything around the house that you happen to have. And I'm kind of just plotting this out visually here for myself before I get started. And I'm going to make the front edge of the leading edge of the table the first thing I put in. And the one thing you want to do is, start a little bit maybe from the center so that you're able to work your way out and work your way out quickly because you want to get your forms laid in very quickly so that you can see, yeah, everything's going to fit or no, it isn't. What I would like for you to try to do is make sure everything in your still life actually fits, like you're not running off the edge of the canvas in any places. So that's what I'm trying to do here, kind of get things laid out. And you'll notice I'm not like obsessing with any one part, kind of trying to move around, get several things laid in. I put this one cylindrical form on its side just so I'd have a little more variety to how things are laid out on the canvas. So I'm just moving around, trying to get things laid in. Again, drawing with that pale blue. Color disappears in a hurry once you get everything laid in, and then also it's a cool color so it doesn't compete with everything in the painting. And as we discussed last time, the Impressionists liked using blue to draw with because they said it was the color of air. So that's kind of a fun little idea or thought. Now, my perspective on the scene is a little bit different from yours as you look at the video that I'm creating here. But I'm trying to keep my drawing as accurate as I possibly can from the angle that I'm taking here, my perspective. And one thing that's really important to do when you're putting together a still life and when you're, doing your initial painting of it, is to consider that you don't want everything to line up, like in terms of the height. So you notice this bottle on the far left's a little bit shorter than the bottle in the middle, which then in turn leads to a bottle that's even a little bit shorter over here. And if you're having trouble working that out, just like put a line and say, okay, I got to come down for this one somewhere in between the two. Now you've noticed here I've kind of placed everything high on the canvas. That's because I want to fully get the table front into my painting because I really like the drawer pull on it. So I'm going to check the angle here. It comes out, and I want to get the entire table on as well. The angle over on this side, because it's facing me, is not quite as sharp. So I get the leading edge of the tabletop across here, and then the table itself is a little bit narrower here. And then I really like this drawer pull, that's just almost right in the middle, and is casting its own little shadow off. So now things maybe don't look so high, given that I've paid a little more attention to what's going on along here. I do think my objects may be just a little squat in proportion. So since I don't really have any room to go up higher, I may come in, and that one feels about right. This guy seems to have gotten a little short, so I'll build him up a little taller. A little taller here. Okay. Just getting my forms laid in. Also going to look at how that shadow cast off the gray bottle runs down the red one. Here. So I basically have my shapes laid in. I'm going to look at where I can get some shadows cast off these guys. In doing so, as we discussed previously, that kind of helps plant them on the table. I think this guy has to come down lower, because I'm really kind of cramped in here. So if I bring him down like so, that, now I've got the room for this guy to come in where he is. But in doing that, now I'm going to have to redraw the front or leading edge of my table. I may end up losing that nice drawer pull, but it's more important that I get a good placement of my objects. So I'm making the leading edge of the table here now. Bring that in. Even as long as I've been painting, I don't just start and get it right off the bat. And you're always looking and making changes. It shouldn't be draw then paint. It should be kind of an organic flow back and forth. So by the time I get to shadow here, I may just end up with like a little semicircle for my drawer pull here, and we'll see how that works. Okay, so I want to go ahead and start laying in the shadows. Now, what's important in doing this is that you not just work on and finish one object at a time. So I'm going to use my ultramarine without really any other color mixed into it to come in and make the shadow side for this large bottle on the right. Bring him down just a little bit too, so I get a little better proportion for him. So I don't know why I think of objects in a still life as being male, calling it him. I guess I could just as easily call them her. Maybe when it's not going well, it's a guy because he's a pain. And when it is going well, it's the other way around. So I've got some shadow laid in on this cylinder. I'm going to go a little darker right along the bottom where it's casting a shadow on the table. You see that? Works pretty well right there. Okay. Try to get some shadow cast off this guy. And bring the bottom of this one down to here. And get a little bit of a shadow cast that bottle. Maybe reinforce this shadow along here. If you recall, when we were doing some of our first bottles, we said the darkest part of the shadow is not at the edge, but actually somewhere in the midst of that darker shadow, so that works pretty well there. I'll do just a few little marks here to kind of indicate that cross contour that we've been discussing. Okay. Just let those help sell us on the roundness of that cylinder. I'm going to reinforce just slightly the contour of him. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and use my blue because it's the coolest color on the shadow for this gray bottle over here. Like so. And I'm going to go ahead and bring the blue now in the foreground for that shadow off the lip of the table. Like there. Bring it over here. Now I get some shadows cast on the wall also. Bit of a shadow back here. So the table itself casts a really strong dark shadow. Be sure to take that shadow and edge all the way to the edge of your canvas. remember to keep your paint pretty thin at the start of the painting, so that when you do go in to make changes, or whether they be drawing or color changes, the paint's not so thick that you can't, get it back to where you want it to be. And there's even a bit of another shadow that creeps up here. There. Alright, kind of like that. So I've got basically light and shadow mixed in on all of these. I'm going to mix in some burnt sienna now. Leave a little bit of that ultramarine blue on my brush so that I can get a nice shadow on this red large bottle. I'm redefining the edge of this cylinder in the foreground. So I've got that shadow, a little bit of shadow here. I think I need to move my neck over just a little bit. And then the gray bottle is casting a shadow on the light side of the red bottle, so I'm going to get that in there like so. I'm going to get a little more blue for what I want to do with the cap on that guy. This guy's got a pretty dark cap on him. Now, how do you make gray? So I've got my ultramarine blue and I've mixed just a little bit of the burnt sienna into it. Now I'm actually going to put some of the yellow ochre in there and just a touch more blue again. And voila, we have a nice gray. So I'm going to take that right up to the edge there. Let those two blend a little bit at the edge. I think I need a clean brush. For the shadow on the yellow bottle, I'm just going to use my yellow ochre more or less straight. Okay, that gives me a pretty good shadow color there, like so. All right, now I want the light on these guys to stay pretty strong. I'm going to go ahead and knock in the front of the table. You see that color is letting some of that ochre show through instead of just staying gray, but I am not going to worry about that right now. We're just laying in broad patches of color. Okay, and let's get some of that gray right there. across. That blue that I put in right here for the shadow at the start was fine then, but now I need to make that darker still. Doesn't have to be perfect when you're starting. Just want you to get things covered as quickly as you possibly can. That's really important when it comes to dealing with color, because the way we see color has everything to do with the colors that surround it. So you could spend an hour trying to get that color right, but until you get the other colors around it that are going to surround it in the end, you're never going to get close to it. So clean my brush out again. I'm going to come in with a kind of a greenish tone for the background now. So let's see what I can get by mixing my ultramarine and some ochre. And it's going to take some white too. It's not going to be a real vibrant green like you see on the wall there. And that's the thing that you have to do with a limited palette, is just approximate colors. Get in the neighborhood, but recognize that I'm not going to be able to mix a perfect green given the limitations that I've given myself with the palette that I have here. That's maybe needs a little more yellow into it, just so it has that same kind of zip. So I come in with something like that. And you see, as I'm painting that, I'm continuing to repaint the jars and bottles and give them new dimensions. You may have noticed I'm working on a stretched canvas today. You can still use your panels for this painting, but I wanted to use a square that seemed to kind of fit the arrangement that I put together. Don't worry about trying to get a smooth color in any one area. It's kind of nice if you just are slopping it in and you end up with a little variation in it. It gives it a little more interest rather than just one solid color over the entire background. Bring this right up to the table edge so that we're losing the lines. That was something we tried to do with our very first painting, and you should continue to work in that manner. Okay. Now I want to go ahead and put a nice light gray on the tabletop. So I'm going to kind of stick with the same color that I've got in my brush, maybe add just a little bit of blue to it. thin it out so that it's easily moved around. Go ahead and bring that color in here. See, I covered up those lines where I had drawn that earlier. Just got rid of that. See the light coming through the table right there. And I get just a little tiny bit of light back here in that back corner, which is kind of a nice way to anchor and define the corner of the table there. Okay. I think my ochre kind of straight will work for that drawer pull. Like so. And I want to clean my brush now and start to come in with some of the colors in the light on the bottles. So I'll start with the yellow. Just going to use the yellow ochre and white. I'm going to use a lot of white in that color mixture. And it's nowhere near as yellow as what you have in the setup, but what I'm trying to do here is just approximate, because my palette doesn't allow me to mix every color. We're just simplifying things a little bit here at the start. Not giving you every color so you don't get just lost, which is really easy to do. Okay. That little spray can is coming along. Like so. I'm going to mix some burnt sienna now in with that color to come up with a lighter red for that large bottle in the background. Well, that's a nice color. Come down like so. And then there's a really cool little lip here that just catches a little bit of light on this front plane. So I want to try and grab that. Trying to get rid of those blues as much as I can from the initial drawing. And you see how even where it shows through a little bit, that color just isn't a problem. It doesn't compete with anything else, really. I want to go back into my shadow on this guy. Get a little bit more in shadow, like so. Okay. Clean my brush again. Now I'm going to start with more or less that ultramarine just for the light on the blue bottle in the background. He's pretty dark. Come in with that color. So, bring him up a little bit higher. Now, since I've gone so dark over on this plane where it's in the light, I'm going to mix some of the burnt sienna with it to give me a much darker shadow side now. See, let it just slightly lighten as it comes over toward the edge. And try to get a little blend there so it's not like a hard corner like there is on that red bottle. So I'm just blending that out using a little bit of my cross contour brush strokes. So now I've got some blue there. I want to get that light blue bottle closer to what he looks like. So I'm going to mix some white just with my ultramarine. And that gives us a nice clean light blue. And when I come in here again, I'm trying to get rid of those initial outlines. So using the cross contour, and right now I'm just gonna kind of mass in the end of that. Okay, great. Now let's mix up our gray again, which the easiest way to get a gray is just kind of mix a little bit of everything you're using and then throw some white into it to get it lighter. We'll talk about color mixing and complementary colors more when we start using the full range of color. So you see I've got yellow, red, blue, and white in there to make my gray. I think I want to go lighter still. Yeah, like that. And see, that stands out against the color that's in the background, so that's good. I think I want to come in with some of my background color now and just come right up against that edge so that it's a little more clear who's in charge there, if you will. You know, I often talk to myself when I'm painting, but if it's not going well, it's not suitable for broadcast. That can go a little darker. I need a little more blue. See, that's really going to make that guy jump out there at that edge, and also make the tabletop stand out a little bit more there. Like that a lot better. You know, painting is just essentially problem solving. Everything you do creates a problem, and you just go to solve it, and then you find another, and you just keep working your way around till you feel satisfied with the whole thing. I like to say that no painting is ever finished. They only get abandoned at different stages. See, still keeping it pretty thin so that I can extend the paint and just move it around. Okay. A lot of you did really well with the single complicated object that you did for homework. So I'm interested to see how you do with tackling multiple forms or shapes. So you see, I painted the shadow on all of them before I started worrying about getting into the lights on any of them. That shadow over there, I'm going to kind of minimize that. He was really confusing the shape of this bottle on this side. Okay, I'm liking that color better. Now, as I've said before, these demonstrations are always just to get you started. Whether you blend out all of your brush strokes or leave your brush strokes showing, either way is fine. That's up to you, up to your individual temperament. But I do expect you to take these paintings farther than I'm going with just these demos. I don't think you want to sit there and watch a 3-hour demo. So I may work some more on this guy over the weekend so that I can show you, you know, just where a painting like this could develop. But I think this is getting near enough for you to get started on your own. In the next week or so, we're going to start actually working longer periods of time on our painting, so it's not just going to be a painting a day sort of thing, and that'll give you time to complete things maybe a little bit more to your satisfaction. Having said that, I don't want you to just get overly picky with your paintings. If you want to get overly picky with your painting, maybe you ought to sign up for photography, which is where we, you know, typically create realistic images. Although sometimes my photographs are more abstract than my paintings, but that's all right. Okay, that neck is bothering me some. He's not quite centered there, is he? So I'm going to come in with that background color again and try to square him up a little bit more. I think that can move over. Oh yeah, far. And like so. Now you notice here, I painted over that. I just put the paint on a little bit thicker, and it did a fair job of covering at that point. So now my neck is a little too thin. Just come in like so. And I'm getting a much better shape there. So that's what I mean when I referred earlier to, you know, you don't draw and then paint. You draw, you paint, you redraw. It's just always going back and forth. And you see I've got, you know, wet paint in both the light and the shadow, and I drag my brush along there, and it just creates kind of a nice blend. Ooh, look at that blue. Right there. So, I'm going to take a little smaller brush now. Maybe look at adding a few details. Like that. Bless you, I heard my wife sneeze upstairs. I don't think she heard me though. There's another little lip on the bottom of that guy. That's kind of nice. Okay. When you have a cylinder like this that's coming towards you, you just need to treat it in terms of multiple circles. Let's see, I make a circle for where the side meets the top, and then all I have to do is do that again for the opening. Like so. I want to just cheat that little bit of corner of that bottle in there from behind. Got that. And I want to darken up some of my shadows now. Too many brushes in my hands. Get a little more of my ultramarine out. So I've used all of the burnt sienna and white that I squeezed out. I've used the ultramarine a couple of times. The yellow ochre, you might just squeeze out a little bit less of that. You might find, depending on your setup, that you might use less. so. And here. And really hit that shadow underneath him. And then I want to take the shadow on the wall back here a little darker still. So I'm going to put some of the burnt sienna in with my colors. These shadows on the wall a little bit darker back here. So some more shadows. Right there. I want to go a little darker on the shadow on the wall right here. Well, that's starting to have some presence to it. So I think the background over here on this side also could benefit from going a little darker where the edge of the spotlight is. So I'm just going to kind of lay that in like so. All right. Probably need to, just go a little more opaquely over that leading edge of the tabletop. There we go. And down here too. All right, so I think that's gonna just about wrap up this demo. Don't be afraid to take yours farther than I have and really develop it to the best of your abilities. And like I said, I may keep working on this some, and then I can bring my painting in for critique. That is, if I do get to it. I've got other stuff I'm painting on right now, which might hold my interest more, but that's all right. I think this certainly gets the point across, and I think this one is certainly stronger than that mess I made on Thursday demonstrating the planar directions with a limited palette. I have another version that I did last year of that I think I'll post for you to be able to see online. But right now I think I've got a solid start on my still life. I may be crowding the top a little bit. Maybe this was too much to try to get that on there. I may, move some things down, but this is something I can work with. I've got light and shadow on each of the objects. Each of the objects is its unique color, And again, we're just approximating what we see since we're using the limited palette, but it does make for everything being pretty harmonious at this point. So that will do us for right now. I hope you have a good weekend and have a good time painting. Let me turn this over so that you can see a little better what I was doing here. There we go. All right.